Okay, everyone, let's start again with our blueprints for the vinyl player or the record player. So in the other class, we made the record spin round, didn't we? The turntable. So now we'll make the arm that holds the needle, and we'll get that to be animated just as it needs to be. Okay, so it'll just move over to the record and make it look like it's touching the record with the needle. Okay. So we need to think, what's the movement? Let's think about how it's going to move. So we've got the arm here, the pivot point's in a great place, which is perfect for us. So when the person interacts with this blueprint, what do we want it to do? Well, the first thing that's going to happen is when you click, the arm is going to move. And where will it need to move? Maybe up here. Okay, and then it's going to need to roll. Okay, so it rises to a certain angle, and then it's going to need to spin to another angle, and then it goes down and it touches the record. So a motion similar to that, okay? That's what it's going to do. So we have to try and reproduce these three different elements, okay? The rise, the spin, and the descend. So let's see if we can set this all up. So we also have to use our set relative rotation as well. So let's just bear those things in mind as we put this together. So it'll be an event to be turned on with the flip flop as well. So I'll add this sequence here to sequence 1, just so it runs at the same time, and add our flip flop. And then event A could be for switching on. So I'll create a timeline to reproduce these events in the time that we want. So let's drag out from here and create a timeline. And we'll name it arm movement. Okay, double click it to get into it. And we need the float as well in a second, but we'll just think about this. Which way is it going? Okay, it's going to rotate on the yaw and then on the roll. Right, okay. So just thinking about the direction and the axes that are needed. So I'll start with 2 coordinates, the roll and the yaw. So which curve gives me 3 coordinates? So I can create 2 floats, one for each axis, or I can create a vector. So a vector gives me both curves at the same time. So just name that. So I can use it just once, and I don't need to think about using another animation sequence. Okay, so let's create it in here. I've done it before as well, so I'll just use the values which I know are going to work. Okay, and then if you want to do the same thing, you can copy it. So basically, we can leave this movement here for 5 seconds. I'll start with a curve on the x-axis, which is going to represent the movement of the arm going up and down, which would be this one. So it'll be on the roll axis. So let's do that. Let's create a movement for that, just here on the x-axis. And let's think in 5 seconds, it has to rise, okay? So it's going to go up, and I can leave 1 second for the arm to do the movement. Let me turn off snap, actually. That'd be a lot easier for us to navigate. Okay. So it won't need 10 degrees, will it? We can use the value it's showing here. We can use 5 degrees just to round it up. So 5 degrees should be enough for us to raise the arm, and 1 second should be sufficient as well. Okay, there we go. It's -5 actually, isn't it? So let's represent this in the curve. So we'll represent the movement of the arm. Oops, I think I did it wrong here. Let me hide that. I can only edit the x-axis, remember? Remember what we saw in the timeline class a few episodes back? So it's idle on the x-axis. I'll leave the resetting position as well. And then in 1 second, it's going to move. Let me just zoom in a bit. So it needs to have the keyframe at that position. And I'll add a key here to the end as well. Okay, so you can see the complete curve now. It makes it a lot easier for us to work it out. At minute or a second 1 second, it's going to rotate until it reaches 5 degrees or minus 5 degrees. And then, so we've got this movement. So that's done to minus 5. And it's going to stop because our arm is then going to start to rotate. Okay. So it's going to rotate on this axis and then it's going to go down. And it'll stop for a while and then it does the opposite movement. All right, let's think about this. So we'll do it section by section just to avoid any problems. We have it here at minus 1. Let me create a key here so we can think about that when it gets to 4 seconds. Okay, so it takes on this movement for, let's just check this again. Okay, so it descends below the original position, doesn't it? This comes down here and we have to find this angle, but we can do that later. So we have our curve. I'll leave it on auto. So it's a nice smooth motion. Let's just do that. And again, minus 5, I'll transform this to auto. And here it's auto 2. Okay, so I'll leave this movement with like this. So it goes down, then goes back up. Okay, so we completed for now the x-axis curve. So that should be fine for now. So that's that movement. Now we need to make the rotation on the other axis. On the other axis, which is going to be this rotation, right? So let's see where that would be. Where would it begin in terms of time? Maybe about here. So it rotates here, 14 degrees. And then we're going to lower it. So I think 14 should be okay, 14 degrees. So we'll rotate on the other axis then in the timeline animation. Let's create a curve on the y-axis. Actually, on the z it is, isn't it, in this situation. So we'll create it on the z-axis. And we'll create it starting at 0. And it stays there for 1 second because the needle's rising, isn't it? And then from 1 to 4 seconds, the needle is going to move, okay? So from 1 to 4, put a value of 0 there, so it will stop. And it's going to start again in the last second. So we'll start it with 0 and then change it later on to 14 over there. So it will rotate 14 degrees and remain at 14 degrees. And just change them so the keyframes were auto. Just to make that nice smooth animation. So it starts, stands still for a second, and then it rotates. Okay, and the other movements happen as well. Let's open the other one so we can see everything. Okay, so it's going to rotate. Let me just fix this. And I'll fix this one at the end too. Okay, so it comes here, it rises, it stops at this point, and the other one moves up to 14 degrees. Okay, so let's see it then. So it rises up, and I'll type it actually just to make it easier. Minus 5. Okay. 5 on the x-axis. It's going to rotate 14. It's going to descend at this point as well down to minus 5. Okay, so return to 0 and descend to 3. About there. Or what about 4 actually? Let's try 4. 4 looks nice. Just makes it look like the needle's touching, doesn't it? Okay, so it has to return to 4 degrees. So I'll return to the beginning there so we don't mess that up. So here, instead of returning to 0, it's going to return to 4. It's on -5, so it goes up until 4. Okay, so we have defined our curve now for our movement. Later we'll test it, and if anything needs to be adjusted, then we can just adjust it. So now I need to change the rotation. So for that, the change in rotation for the arm and the needle, we just need to link the values in here. Okay, so we just need to relink these values for that. I don't need to multiply anything because I've already typed the correct values and angles here. So I need to link these, and but here I've got a vector and here a rotation vector. So I'll split the pin. So it opens up the 3 curves and split this one as well. I have a new rotation roll here, Rx, and I'll link that in. And a new rotation yaw, which I'll link here. And something we already changed, X is red and Z is blue. I don't need to link Y because I didn't edit that, did I? But I'll do it anyway just to make our node complete. So let's see what happens when these changes are made. Let's press play, and we'll zoom in as well if we can. There we go. And we'll click it. It rises up, moves into place, and then it comes down. There we go. And it starts to play the music. Okay. There we go. So we have a complete motion here. We made it rise, we made it move, and we made it descend. So now we can think, well, later on we can think about adding the music, okay? Especially at the point of when the needle touches the record. Like it's a real record player that starts when the needle hits. Okay, now we only need to turn it off by using the opposite movement. Okay, so let's do that. So to set it up for the reverse, when I press it again, it's going to reverse the motion. So we need to put B into here, and we just link the reverse, and it's going to hopefully move backwards, turning the player off. So let's just see that in practice. Okay, here we go. So it starts to spin, it moves, goes down. Music begins. Now if I want to turn it off, just press it again. It stops, moves back, and back in position. Nice. But usually what starts the movement for the record is when the needle makes contact, right? And what stops the record is when the needle moves up. So we might need to do some work here. But it's going to stop rotating when the needle returns to the base position. So let's see if we can fix that in the 5-second period. So what we can do here is simply delay the stop. Okay, so when I click, I want the delay to happen before it stops. So we can add in a delay, and we can delay it to about 5 seconds. Makes sense, doesn't it? Let's just move it over so we've got a bit more space. Cool. So there we go. So here I press the button. It's going to delay for 5 seconds. And let's see what happens. Okay, it's rotating. The needle goes down, plays. I want to turn it off. It keeps spinning. And the needle goes back into place, and the record stops, okay? So that's a bit better, isn't it? Now we have a record player with all its animations made in the blueprint. Cool. So the animations for the mesh have been complete. So let's just comment on that. And we're going to call this arm movement. And our blueprint with the animations are ready. So we'll add the feature of the music in the next class.